Hey everybody, tonight we're debating whether or not the left has gone too far, and we are starting right now with the yes side in particular. JF, thanks for being with us. The floor is all yours.
All right, it's a pleasure to be here. Since it was long during the preparation of the debate, we spent time talking about circumcision. That was pretty fun. And I thank James for kicking the female member of this debate out so that we could do so in a private male space where I felt comfortable to talk about my views. Has the left gone too far? Absolutely, it has gone too far. The question is not so much whether it has gone too far, as when exactly did it start going too far? In my view, somewhere around the 19th century. Here's someone having lived in a leftist city, a man named Nat Friedman. On Twitter, he says, "We moved out of San Francisco to Menlo Park a year ago after two meth addicts broke into our house while we were home and robbed us. They are both free now. The police who arrested them and were later forced to release them by the DA said these criminals were frequent flyers. We didn't want to leave San Francisco. We love it there. But we have a young kid, and it seemed irresponsible to stay in a place where drug addicts commit home invasions to the point where they are called frequent flyers." Retweeted and replied to by Elon Musk today. The left has a problem of contact with reality. The great failure of the left is that it is based on a lie. This lie is this obfuscation of the fact of human evolution, human difference, human inequality. And the problem is that the left wants to not address how we could really make the world more equals, but they want to deceive themselves into a world that is impossible to reach, a racial gender utopia filled with lies, unsustainable. They don't have a solution where they would accomplish both their political project and also make it sustainable. Their projects are not sustainable because they keep farming worse human beings into our societies. It is quite simple. If you're a farmer and you select the pigs that are the less fat in your pigs or cows or chicken, if you select the animals that are the less fat, you will end up with smaller animals, you will end up with less meat. We understood this as farmers for hundreds of years. Yet, when it comes to human society, leftists refuse to face the reality of evolution, the reality of you can't operate a society that has built-in evolutionary structures, eugenic structures that reward lack of accomplishment, that reward poverty, that reward criminality. And the case that I've read from Nat Friedman, someone fleeing San Francisco, is not rare at all. It is so common that it is now statistically detectable. A title on the Daily Mail here, "Woke Exodus. California and New York have each lost more than 500,000 residents since April 2020 as people flee due to surging home prices and out-of-control crime." So the proof that leftism is failing, has gone too far, is that people are choosing away from leftism. Of course, they may not know that they're fleeing leftism. They think they're fleeing taxes. They think they're fleeing crimes. They think they're fleeing COVID-19 tickets. But the reality is those are symptoms of leftist cities and how they implement their political project. We see a crime rise from starting somewhere around 2015. This crime rise is mostly underlined by an effect in the city. So since 2015, and crime had been going down and down for decades. But since 2015, the trend has been reversed. And this trend has been reversed because we are faced with people going soft on crime, because we don't put people in jail anymore. The entire system of leftism is also based on an economic lie, the lie of the money supply, the lie that is operated by the Fed, the fact that if I look at a graph between 1980 and 2015, what do we see? Growing and growing, ever growing money supply. So why do leftists need money supply? Because if you have a money supply expansion, you control an economy, you devalue the value of the conservatives who are natural savers of money, who are naturally economically sound. and you end up injecting money in the system through your own ways, which ends up employing a bunch of useless workers in big tech in California and in other systems that benefit from this constant rise, which can be easily drained by the private sector by simply selling stocks so that they can drain these flows of monies toward them. That's how they acquire control of a place. They end up employing large amounts of workforce that are absolutely useless. Elon Musk has proven that with Twitter. You can basically fire 70 to 80% of people in current big tech, and you have zero effect that is negative on your company. Leftism has went too far with schools, with the false assumption of leftist and Marxist that everyone is fixable, that everyone can be helped if they're just given the chance. Education outcomes in Chicago's lowest performing public schools, only 25% of students in Chicago's lowest performing elementary schools met state standard. Only 5% of students in Chicago's lowest performing high schools met state standard. We are sending 100 people to that school, these worst schools. 95% of them, 95 out of 100, will end up not meeting state standards. So we're hosting schools where people don't learn. That is the great lie of leftism. We're going to make it look like we're trying to fix it. We don't know how to fix it. There's no way to fix it. That's what the leftists don't want to hear. There is simply no way to fix certain human beings on Earth, and you better build a wall around them and run, or they will come at you and they will make your life impossible to live. We've had a recent case of trans extremism, another illustration of leftism gone too far. Trans Tennesseans face backlash after school shootings. That's a title at Reuters. Of course, evidently, the shooter that has been shooting people in a school recently was motivated by leftist ideology. We don't get to see their manifesto, and yet whenever someone from the right wing does a shooting, we get full publicity around the manifesto. Why is that? Because the leftists in power don't want you to know that some people died recently because they were targeted by a trans extremist ideological shooter who wanted to kill Christians. Absolutely horrible. And the lie that they put on top of it is to hide you from these facts. Jan Miles Chung's on Twitter yesterday. California school board votes to uphold so-called parental secrecy policy for transgender students. Here's another point of failure of the left. This takeover of parental rights, this takeover of gender identity control over children with the goal of making them non-reproductive and condemning them to life of psychological suffering for the rest of their life. If you could take trans ideology and radical LGBT activism and roll them into a cylinder, add a filter to them and smoke them, you would have to label this ideology as one of the most destructive ideology possible. It comes with probably bigger consequences than becoming a tobacco smoker. And yet it's an ideology that circulates freely in our school, destroys the life of our children, and they're setting the legal system up so that you as a parent can never get to know. 2 more points of failure before we move to as very quick. Censorship. Look at my impressions. This is my impressions on my Twitter account between 2016 and 2023. Look at what the leftists have done here. They've deprived millions of people from hearing my view as a scientist, from hearing the facts I bring, and that's the authoritarianism of leftists gone too far. And finally, in case you wonder whether this is all good for women, let's talk about women. Conservatism is the best thing you can do to a woman to lower her depressive scores to the lowest. Whereas imbuing her with liberalism, and here we see the evolution from 2005 to 2018, the females with the most depressive affect are female liberals, the line in blue here. Whereas the females who are the most happy are the line in red, the female conservatives. So it's not even helping females. So why are we going on with this slide that leftism is, as I'm giving it to you?
Ready, infrared.
All right. So I'm also taking the affirmative on that leftism has indeed gone too far. And, I think I want to be clear in terms of the scope of what I mean by leftism, just for purposes of clarification. In my view, I don't want to get too bogged down into semantics. I think leftism is something right now, at least, as far as what most people mean by it, something pretty unique to the post Bernie Sanders failure American politics. So to me, when most people talk about leftism today, especially the rise of the radical leftism and so on and so forth, it was a result of the failure and impotency of the concrete left-wing politics of Bernie Sanders. So back in 2015, 2016, nobody was under the impression that Bernie Sanders was an example of leftism gone too far. There may have been some voices saying that. There may have been, actually, the most amount of voices that would be affirming that would be from the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton would probably be like, oh, yeah, Bernie Sanders is leftism gone too far. But as far as society was concerned, I think that would be pretty contentious and not really self-evident. But after the failure of Bernie Sanders and his own failure to address that failure, like he continued to endorse Hillary Clinton and got reabsorbed by the Democratic Party machine, everyone started to see leftism as just the horrible wokeism bullshit that everyone's always hated. But now there was no real concrete left-wing politics, such as the populism of Bernie Sanders, to be a counterweight to that. So that all that was left of leftism pretty much was just the woke bullshit. Now, let's be clear. In terms of politics, we have a ruling class, right? We have a ruling class, in my view, which completely controls everything about the political system in the US. Donald Trump was a fluke, is an exception to the rule, and he's been put in jail for that very reason. I don't want to get off topic, but largely speaking, the things that actually concretely drive politics are not really aligned with the historically left-wing position, right? Billionaire oligarchs controlling everything about our political system. That's not really what Robespierre would have envisioned as far as a representation of his own politics, right? So I think we can be clear that the leftism that's gone too far is a reaction to the objective failure of any independent left-wing or left-wing populistic kind of politics. So the question, has leftism gone too far? It absolutely has. There's been a total psychosis where the elite kind of professional managerial upper stratum of our society have this cultural agenda, and this agenda for what they consider to be what social mores and norms and cultural norms should be, that is completely disconnected from the sensibilities of probably the overwhelming majority of people in this country. And the more people resist and push back against their agenda, the more they accuse these people of being under the influence of fascism, or they're reactionaries, or they're evil and they're bad, when people could be apolitical, having no political views whatsoever, and they just have this almost instinctual, natural revulsion to what leftists are trying to pass off as the new norm. And look, after nearly a decade of failed cultural agenda, the problem with leftism going too far now is that instead of reflecting back upon why their position is so unpopular and so grotesque, actually, to the majority of people, I'd be willing to die on that hill that most families, at least, object to the cultural agenda of the left overwhelmingly. They just kind of continue to double down and adopt even more extreme positions. An example of that is this whole narrative about a so-called trans genocide that's going around. Because of the failure of that specific ideology adopting the acceptance that it was expected to, there's now claims that, there's going to be a trans genocide, so we need to preemptively strike and I don't know how much I can say, but I think it's leading to a kind of violent extremism. If you go to Seattle with Chaz, if you go to Portland, if you go to these hotbeds of these Antifa leftists, I mean, it's pretty much been normalized among them that violence against people just because they disagree with you, and moreover, disagree with you on things of what you consider to be culturally acceptable, is justified. You could be someone who does no harm whatsoever to anyone on any tangible level, but just because you openly object to their opinion on gender or anything like this, they think violence against you is acceptable. So the question, has leftism gone too far? To me, seems pretty self-evident. It has. There needs to be a rude awakening as far as the left, if there even is one, that they have been in a position of failure since the defeat of Bernie Sanders in 2016. Nobody's gone back to the drawing board and figured out why that was. They've decided to just go in these other directions, which have been a total disaster, in my view. So I think that's all I'd say to that.
Thank you very much for those opening statements. And want to say, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, I am your host, James. We want to say, first, we hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you are from, politically left, politically right, you name it. We are glad that you are here. We are a neutral debate platform. And, folks, if you have been living in a cave on Mars with your fingers in your ears and you didn't know about our in-person conference happening in 2 weeks, check out the bottom right side of your screen. DebateCon 3.1 by Modern Day Debate is our third conference. It's in Fort Worth, Texas on Saturday, April 22nd. You don't want to miss it. Links to the in-person tickets are in the description box. And in the description box, if you're like, oh, James, I'm too far from Fort Worth, that's not going to work for me. Don't worry. We actually have, if you throw in $1, it helps us support or take care of the cost of the venue, and you get to watch the entire conference live from at home. Just $1. So we're going to jump into the opening statement from Radical Coder and Ashley S., but do check out those links in the description box. As I mentioned, it's going to be a huge conference. Thanks very much. Ashley and Radical Coder, the floor is all yours.
All right. So the terms left-wing and right-wing are political ideologies that originated during the French Revolution in the 18th century. The meanings and connotations of these terms vary depending on the country, region, or context in which they're used, but as a red-blooded American, I will focus on the left wing of the US. In general, being left-wing is associated with advocating for progressive or liberal policies that prioritize social equality, government intervention, and collective action. I have a few categories and examples of policies in each of these categories that would fall under this these umbrellas. So in terms of climate change, things like investing in green energy, environmental protections, banning or at least limiting fracking, incentives to reducing carbon emissions. Also, I guess I didn't write this one down, but just acknowledging climate change. Economic and social justice is another category. Policies would be focused on things like gender and racial equality, labor unions and worker rights, progressive taxation, social welfare, voting participation, and reproductive rights. In terms of education, things are going to be focused on increased funding for public education, free college tuition and or tuition reimbursement, diversity and multiculturalism in curricula, support for teachers and educators, universal access to early childhood education. In the healthcare department, we have public option for health insurance, ideally some form of universal healthcare eventually, price controls on life-saving drugs, increased access to preventative care, criminal justice reform. We focus on things like sentencing laws, mandatory minimums, and alternatives to incarceration, police reform and police accountability, restorative justice and rehabilitation, and ending the war on drugs. These policies are generally consistent with the left-wing values of human rights, democracy, diversity and inclusion, compassion, solidarity, and cooperation. On the other hand, being right-wing is associated with advocating for conservative or traditionalist policies that claim to prioritize individual freedom, limited government intervention, and personal responsibility. In theory, some of these values seem reasonable and perhaps even admirable. However, I believe in actuality, those values are best realized through policies that the right wing explicitly opposes, which would benefit the majority of people. For example, the right wing is currently obsessing over things like drag queen story hour, trans people having access to healthcare or bathrooms, critical race theory, where at least 15 states have introduced measures this session that would prohibit CRT and related concepts in all publicly funded schools. Nearly 24 states have proposed legislation that would limit how teachers can talk about race and racism in the classroom, restricting the reproductive rights of women. We just saw Roe v. Wade be overturned. Republicans have been cutting public school funding for years. Republican lawmakers in 43 states have introduced over 250 bills aimed at restricting the voting rights of tens of millions of people. These suggest to me that the espoused value of limited government is primarily focused on maintaining the interests of the wealthiest Americans, rather than individual freedom, which they don't seem to have that much of an issue trampling over in the name of social conservatism. The values in reality that the right wing are pushing for, again, favor the interests of the wealthy and powerful: hierarchy, authority, conformity. So, has the left gone too far in terms of climate change? The Republican Party is one of the only political parties on earth who doesn't even believe in it, or that we can or should do anything about it. Meanwhile, the US accounts for 15% of global emissions. The total cost of weather and climate disasters in the US in 2020 alone cost an estimated $95 billion. In terms of education, the US spends less on education in low-income districts compared to high-income. We have a massive teacher shortage. Schools with higher proportions of Black or Hispanic students have offer fewer math, science, and college prep courses. In terms of healthcare, and that's just the tip of the iceberg for education. In terms of healthcare, the United States is ranked 35th in the world when it comes to healthcare, although we spend more on healthcare than any other country. And as of 2020, approximately 29 million Americans were uninsured. Economic and social justice, or social injustice, I think is a better way to describe it, the focus of it anyway. So massive disparities remain along racial lines, and the wealth gap between the rich and the poor has never been higher. An estimated 45.4 million people and 14 million children lived in food insecure households. Women who worked full-time year-round earned 82 cents for every dollar earned by men. Black women earned 63 cents, and Latino women earned 55 cents for every dollar earned by white men. 2.2 million LGBTQ plus adults experience food insecurity, and 21% of transgender individuals reported experiencing homelessness at some point in their lives. And as we all know too well, about 40% of them have attempted suicide at some point in their lives. The fact of the matter is, and this may be triggering, but facts really don't care about your feelings, the United States, for most of its existence, was an explicit white supremacist and patriarchal apartheid state, primarily focused on the interests of the white landowning class. That land, of course, was acquired and maintained through racialized imperialism, genocide, and slavery, and justified through the invention of race. The left, as it were, has made incredible strides in reforming that system into a more equitable system. And for those of us who seek to continue that push towards a better world for people of all backgrounds, it is overwhelmingly clear, to me at least, that we have a very long way to go.
We'll kick it over to Ashley S.
Hey, yeah. So obviously, Brian, that was a really good opening statement. Thank you. All were very good opening statements. I would say that for me personally, what I feel like the right wing's main arguments are that the left has gone too far. What have we heard a lot of? We've heard a lot of it has a lot to do with female reproductive rights. It has a lot to do with LGBTQ plus community rights. It has a lot to do with crime rates, and it has a lot to do with violence, right? So if you look at the core of it, I guess my main point of contention would be education levels. I really do think that it all, I mean, that's a broad statement, but I think that a majority of it comes down to education. So if you go back to what our first speaker said about, which cities tend to have the most crime rates, right? It's going to be your Democratic run cities. And which women seem to be the most happiest? It's going to be Republican women. If you guys actually go and look at these studies, and then you look at the studies on these studies, you'll find that these people that are the happiest, the women, and so on and so forth, they're going to be the women that are less educated. So if you look at some statistics, it's going to say, 56% of men agree that the United States has become too soft and feminine, compared to only 34% of women. Well, if you go and you break that down, you'll look at the percentage of men versus women that say they're happier with these traditional idealistic ideologies. They're uneducated. There's got to be a correlation between why women and men that are more educated with college degrees seem to have these thoughts that are so different and far from the right wing. And then when the point of contention saying that like it's going to be your more liberal cities and states that have the highest crime rates. First of all, where do people tend to flock to the most? It's going to be your bigger, more urban dominated areas, right? Anytime that you have a dense population, you have a melting pot. You have so many different genders, races, cultural backgrounds. That's going to cause in and of itself more conflict. You're going to have more crime. But the fact is that the stats are wrong. Actually, the study found really that if we're talking about crime versus murder, that actually murder rates are 40% higher overall in states that Trump carried versus Biden in 2020. So it just depends on what stats that you want to cherry pick to correlate with your argument. But I think that at the core of it, we could all agree that when you have a melting pot, you have an area that draws more cultural and diverse, backgrounds from every demographic, you are going to have more conflict. That is just common sense in my opinion. I don't think that is something that we could just pin on one party or the other. That's why there's so many studies on it. And that's why I just absolutely love, sarcastically, that incredibly right-wing wingettes, like to choose studies that will support their ideologies. But then when you present conflicting studies, you'll find overwhelmingly that they go, oh, well, what's the credibility of that? What's that? Like, I'm looking at the Daily Mail. Well, I'm looking at, universities. I'm looking at the New York Times, like there has to be some give and take as far as which studies that you want to actually look at and choose to believe. There's also a study that says people tend to believe studies that already support their preconceived notions. There's a big study on this as well. And I think that just as human beings, we can agree that that's right. I think the biggest thing for me, as far as right and left wing, we could all get down to some monies and things like that, sure. But if we're looking at basic human rights, I would see that the right wing, I have seen, especially just in my lifetime as a millennial, that they've continuously tried to silence the voice of women, silence the voice of the LGBTQ plus community, keep us in poverty, keep us without access to universal health care and education. All of these, I agree with Ryan Radical Coder, are ways that the government controls us. The government tries to control us. And the more the government controls their people, leaving them without the option to gain access to these resources, the more you're going to find that you're going to have unhappy versus happy statistics to show. It's just, I don't think that people are getting down to the core of why. Why are these people more happy versus unhappy? Why are we doing these things? And I think that the right wing saying that they're all about more freedoms, I think that is just the wolf in sheep's clothing. They're telling people what they want to hear when the truth is they want more government control. They want to keep these people that are already up here, and they want to keep those of us or that are down here, period. End of story for me.
Thank you very much for that opening as well. And before we go into the open conversation, want to say, folks, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We have many more juicy debates coming up. We are going to kick it over to both teams for this open dialogue. Thank you very much for being with us. The floor is all yours, Ashley, Radical Coder, Infrared, and JF.
All right. I'd like to answer to a couple of points from Ashley, who claims that murder is higher in Trump states. The thing is, we know the mechanism behind this statistic. I don't only read the Daily Mail. I read the studies too. And what we know is that Trump states, being right-wing states, end up having laws and respect for gun rights that is greater than leftist states. However, the crimes are high in Trump state because the crimes are high in the cities that are controlled by the Democrats. It is not the Republican areas in the countryside that are inducing these statistics. It is really the cities. And I'm kind of stunned at one of the admissions of Ashley, which is that more diversity in gender and races tends to create more density and more crimes. That is something that we don't hear from the left very much. You seem to be in contact with a truth there that your colleagues of the left don't often acknowledge.
Oh, thank you. I think that that's common sense. I think that most anybody that would say you're going to put 100 people in a room that have completely different ideologies, gender, race, and cultural backgrounds would definitely have more conflict than if you put 100 people in a room that do not. Does that mean I'm a white supremacist? No. But that means that I have common sense. Thank you.
But would you say diversity isn't our strength?
I would say diversity is definitely a strength. I'm saying when you put it in a high concentration overall, worldwide, you're going to see that. It has nothing to do with whether or not we should or shouldn't participate in encouraging cultural diversity and backgrounds. It's just common sense. It's common sense and a statistical fact.
So
yeah, and I would. I was also just going to add to that, like, in terms of the diversity stuff. I think we do see, or at least my understanding, and I don't have studies on hand or anything about this. But like, when you put a lot of different people in like the melting pot situation, initially, like, you do tend to see that spike in crime and things like this. Especially if it's like super population dense and very low income, which kind of is to be expected. But I think over time you do see more cohesion between the different groups that are melting, quote unquote, melting together, you know, and like people like becoming like more okay. Like there's a famous bit that like Tucker Carlson complained about of like people coming back to their city and a bunch of people were speaking Spanish. But then like if you read further down the article, they're like talking about how like they've been learning Spanish and they've started getting along with people that they didn't think they could before. And so there's things like that to keep in mind as well.
So I would just want to say, responding to the openings just broadly, I'd propose the question, how much of this could be like a kind of no true Scotsman thing? And what I mean by that is that I'm hearing a lot about values that are purported to be the values of the American left wing, but don't the actual real existing leftism, meaning the actions and activity of leftists, doesn't that have any bearing as far as the topic of has leftism gone too far? And what I mean by that is that if we're going to define, for example, these important left-wing political causes such as free healthcare and the whole, even the climate stuff, which even I don't agree with, but just if I were to grant that to you, that's a kind of ideal policies you want to get through, how effective are leftists in even being able to realize that? You said, okay, well, the right wing focuses too much on the drag queen story hour stuff. Well, let me tell you something. I know a lot of leftist organizations, and I've had experience with leftist organizations. And if you go to their meetings, they will talk about transgender issues for like 90% of it. They don't tolerate any dissent or disagreement whatsoever on that topic. They make it very loud and clear where they stand as far as this highly contentious culture war is concerned. I mean, for International Women's Day, for example, an leftist organization called the PSL decided to hold a drag show. And it's like they pour so much resources into the culture stuff. They are so harsh to anyone who doesn't agree with it. I don't really see how this focus on maybe frivolous cultural issues is coming from the right. I think on the ground, when you try to organize with leftists and build a movement, you know, even Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020, it's like they couldn't do anything. They were totally kept on a leash because all this woke bullshit, and it made it impossible for them to reach ordinary people in an effective way. So my question would be,
just to be sure we get to the dialogue.
Yeah. No, I just want to say real quick, like, is leftism really just all these policies you're talking about? Or is it this deranged woke stuff that's preventing any real left-wing politics from ever getting anywhere, you know?
I think you would have to look at media, social media versus actual media, and what the way that they also control politics, because it just, the things that you're mentioning specifically, when Ryan's talking about policies, these are the ways, in my belief, that the media and the social media tries to sway your quote unquote average person into getting more emotionally invested in which way they want to vote, which is part of what I was going back to with education. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of like Well, in terms of whether or not these policies like represent leftism, I think the values of like of the left wing, quote unquote, like they seem to generally most people would agree that there are things like the ones I listed, like social equality, government intervention to varying degrees, and collective action, and that all of these policies tend to be in line with that. As for like the trans issues being like front and foremost, I do think we are in the midst of something of like a cultural revolution in terms of like trans acceptance, and in the wake of that, maybe in spite of that specifically, I should say, we have seen a massive landslide of legislation from the Republican Party that's explicitly focused on limiting the rights of trans people to even go to the bathroom, which basically blocks them from engaging in society. I mean, if you want to go grocery shopping and you're not allowed to take a shit in that store, then you're fucked. Like, I mean, what are you going to order? HelloFresh? You're like statistically more likely to be poor as well. So like, and all of these things a lot of these culture war things. People complain about culture war, like the culture war is being waged on like by the right, like legislatively, absolutely. And it's because,
do you think some of that not to cut you off, but do you think some of that legislation might be a response to this kind of extreme left-wing activism? Because I could tell you, before we had any of this legislation, I think it's fair to say maybe this was 2015, 2016. We weren't seeing a lot of that legislation, and it wasn't as contentious as it is now. I could tell you that I was at college at that time. And in these university campuses, just as an example of the institutions, left-wing activists or leftist activists specifically on that issue were so extreme and rabid and aggressive in pushing for it that I can't really say that it's coming from the right just based on my own anecdotal observations, because I was there before it got big. And I would argue that the right has just reacted to what left-wing activists have done. Now, if you want to say this is part of a cultural revolution and that the right wing is being reactionary with regard to the trends of society, I'd also disagree, because leftist activists who are in these bubbles have no connection to the wider society at all. All they've done is use institutions like corporations, academia, and things that they have power within in these bubbles to push the agenda, not getting any traction within actual society. And then, yeah, obviously the right-wing politicians with huge popular support are going to be pushing against that. But the reason is because it's not a cultural revolution. It hasn't actually penetrated society. That's why right-wing politicians are so successful, because the majority of people are against it.
Well, I think it's penetrated in different places, and like different bubbles for sure. I was also in college around the same time, and I did see, like, at the time I didn't have a lot of the quite as progressive views as I do now, especially on those things. Like I was mildly reactionary when the first time someone asked me to use like they them pronouns for them, for example. I laughed, and in retrospect, I feel bad. I laughed at a friend of mine, and I was mean, they asked me to treat them like as a human being to human being. They were like, hey, like I prefer this, and like it just makes me more comfortable, and I didn't like yield that at all. I was very abrasive to it. And I think that a lot of people feel this way when they're first introduced to a lot of these things, especially with people like switching genders completely, like, expressing themselves as a completely different person. And I think yes, we're going to see, as there's more of this kind of allowed in society. And when I say allowed, because a lot of places, like, or a lot of families even, like it's explicitly not allowed, which is one of the reasons we see such high suicide rates and stuff. I think as these things become more public, as people can share their stories more, you're going to get that pushback from people who don't want them to do that, because that's not the norm. That's not how we view men and women. We have this very rigid idea of gender roles historically, and like who's allowed to present in a certain way, who's allowed to wear certain clothes and wear their hair and use certain fucking words. I do think that it's a reactionary. The legislation is very reactionary.
Just real quick though, just to be clear, I just want to say one thing. It's clear that this is not a grassroots thing coming from society. That the only reason it's acquired the publicity and relevance it has is because of the acceptance it's gotten within institutions, not within society, not within communities, but specifically institutions with power, media, academia, and other kind of sites of hegemony. If it weren't for the activists who within those bubbles won all of those victories, normal people probably would not be as exposed to this extremely contentious topic as
So
they
true.
have now.
We should thank those activists for bringing it to the forefront and letting more people understand like where like these people's experience and helping them empathize with them, like I did.
There's always a voice. There's always a voice. So like, there's a lot of things that we're not going to know or heard of whatever your definition of normal is. But I think that you've got across, we're just talking about the United States, I guess, across the United States, you're going to have a large exorbitant, like as we've seen, a huge amount of people that do identify with these issues that are being brought forward. They've just never had a voice before. So you can say that about any kind of revolution. Like there's always going to be some bigger boom, so to speak, that's going to bring these issues to the forefront and make people feel like they have the right to, or they're more comfortable to actually identify the way they want to identify and come forward with those beliefs. Right. And again, it goes back to education and exposure as we've progressed as far as our technology goes, more people being able to talk to more people across the world, more access to news, more access to what's going on out there. People feel less alone. So I think that can be argued both ways.
But the issue is that we're not just dealing with exposure in terms of people raising their voice. We're dealing with concentrated attempts to engineer
from both sides.
artificially.
From both sides.
No, but this is what came first, and then you had backlash.
No, it depends on what you want to say.
No. I can give you a concrete example of this. First, major institutions within society made a push to engineer people's behavior and regulate people's behavior in the way that they saw fit. It wasn't about giving certain people a voice. It was about forcing people to conform to behaviors and sensibilities that were otherwise not they were not disposed to. So,
that's
for example, the pronoun thing. There's some workplaces that would require you to, don't assume someone's pronoun. Say your pronoun first.
Okay.
The bathroom stuff, right? All this kind of changes in how people behave and interact on an everyday level. That's where their backlash came from. I
would say your foundation was built on quicksand. I don't think that's very concrete.
I think in terms of the bathroom bill or the bathroom stuff, I think the bills like trans people have been going to the bathroom that they identify with for decades.
Yeah. But if it's not concrete, then how do you speak for all of the people who were fired from their workplace and lost their entire livelihoods and income because they didn't want to conform to these new behaviors?
I would say concrete, if you're getting fired from a job for like refusing to use someone's pronouns or whatever, there's probably ways that you can, like, if you really just like it's so out, like you're so against it, you just absolutely can't, then just call them by their name or something. Like I think there's like other ways to engage with this that don't require, like, I think when it escalates to people getting fired, I'm very suspicious that it's just this mild, like, I'd just rather not, like it probably is escalated to some form of harassment.
people see this as extremely contrioused and ingenuine, and it just goes against their sensibilities. And you can say, okay, well,
sensibilities or prejudices.
I don't think it's, I actually don't think it's prejudice though. If you want to,
you would give up your livelihood and your paycheck because you refuse to acknowledge that someone wants.
Listen, media can't just decide, living in a bubble and out of touch with people's everyday sensibilities, these are the new norms. If you don't adopt them, we're going to fire you. We're going to oppress you. We're going to harass you. Shouldn't our elites and our major institutions represent the sensibilities of the majority? What gives them the right to adopt the sensibilities of an acute minority living in these coasts, these urban graduate students, whatever, and force that on the majority? Why should they expect there's not going to be a backlash given how out of touch they are with the majority of people's sensibilities? It's fair to say that when institutions clash with the sensibilities of the majority, those institutions lose the legitimacy they used to have. And that's what we're starting to see.
I want to give you a chance to respond, Radical Coder and Ashley, and then I want to hear if he has anything to say, JF, as we've been going back and forth with Infrared for a while.
Yes, I've been agreeing with Az, which is why I've stayed silent. It's almost surprising that I agreed with him so much that I forgot he was a communist. But I've heard some misconceptions from Ryan and Ashley that I want to bring to the forefront. This conception that Republicans across America are shutting down women's speech or shutting down LGBT speech. I think that what's misunderstood here is that what's mostly happening is that Republicans, and there may be little exceptions, but the vast majority of those laws that they're talking about it's Republicans defunding certain forms of state-funded speech. It's really Republicans not saying you can't talk about LGBT stuff, but we won't pay you to talk about LGBT stuff to 7 years old. That is very different from speech restriction that I believe this is literally the term that Ashley used, that those were attacks on LGBT speech. It's not. It's attack on funding of stuff that parents don't want to teach to their children.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say in terms of like teaching it to like kids, like I mean, like LGBTQ people exist. I don't see any like any reason to like lie to children about these people, whether or not they exist. I think that's like a really weird angle to approach it. I understand that like parents have reservations about it, but a lot of parents have reservations about their children learning about evolution. A lot of parents have reservations about children learning a lot of things that they probably should learn in school. Sex ed is an important one, especially in terms of, I mean, we talked about this last time we spoke on here, Haas, I think, but in terms of like at an age appropriate level, like you want kids to understand things like my no-no square, you know, like don't touch me there, and stuff like this. And there are also like child-friendly ways to talk about like, oh, like some like people who might look like your daddy might eventually like want to look more like your mom, and like
so your criteria there would be it's true they exist, therefore we should teach it to children.
I think that's part of it. I don't think we should lie to the children about whether these people exist, especially if they're asking questions about it. I'm not saying it should be like part of the kindergarten curriculum to like be like, here's our transgender module.
But right now
like,
it is. That's the problem.
That's absolutely not true.
But I would ask you then, would you be up for teaching race crime statistics to children?
Sure.
Because
yeah. Well, in terms of talking about like racism.
Then yes.
Yeah, in terms of talking about racism with kids, I think kids, especially like
I didn't say racism.
I know what you said. Yeah, I know what you said. In terms of teaching kids about race and racism, I think like young Black kids can certainly experience racism. I think white kids. I know. I'm getting to it. I'm not. I promise I'm not.
So if there are racists that commit more crime, will we teach it to our children?
I understand.
Because right now we're not.
What I'm saying is, I wouldn't tell the kids like, okay, Black people do a bunch of crime. I would say that like we need to teach kids about the history of race in this country, how it was constructed, the way that it worked, the way that it was used as a legal construct to block certain people from access to institutions, the way that prevented people from living in different areas, and the way that it continues to impact the lives of millions and millions of Americans. And we should understand that these specific legal obstacles and forces that push people into these areas and that push them to be so underfunded is the same reason that we see these high crime rates there, and we should help.
Well,
kids,
I think,
and that's where you're proving that you're not at all basic. When you say it's true, they exist, therefore let's teach it. You don't care about teaching the truth to children.
Bullshit.
What you care about is injecting your moral discourse into the facts that you teach to children.
Wait.
What the Republicans are doing in states like Florida is they're calling your bullshit.
Wait, Ryan.
No, they're banning AP African American.
Sure that there's not too much interrupting.
They want people to be misinformed.
There's something important here, though, okay? Because you just mentioned that if you wanted to include that detail, you'd also include what you think is the cause for that, right?
Which what I know is the cause for that. Poverty. Yeah. I mean, I think it's very rational.
Well, you said if you wanted to teach children about the crime, you'd also want to give context and a cause, which would, in your view, would be crime and underfunding of whatever. Okay, well, by that same logic, the problem is not the fact that children are being exposed to the fact that transgender people exist. The problem is that the way they're being taught this is getting at to the fundamentals of how they perceive and understand what sex and gender is. If you tell children that, oh yeah, by the way, you can just freely choose your gender, or you may not be the gender you were born with or that your parents raised you with, that creates a lot of confusion because you're getting at the fundamentals of their identity and you're actually doing something for their development, which is the most important thing, is the development of the child. How are they going to become an adult? Well, when you teach them about transgender ideology, you can't just say, oh yeah, we have to teach them that these certain people exist. Well,
they do exist.
What you're hiding, though, is that you're also teaching them a specific narrative and context for why those people exist, which is that they either chose it arbitrarily or oh yeah, you may not know what gender you are. So if children start getting confused about what gender they really are, because it may not be the one they were given by their parents, you're going to see a huge increase. And I think we can demonstrate this empirically probably right now with the current generation of people who identify as trans who otherwise would not have. And that's the problem. So if you want to talk about context, would you also
so just to clarify,
would you be open to presenting? Would you be open? Hold on. The issue is, I think it's clear that there are a great many issues.
I do want just to be let's humor Ashley Hawes just to be sure that she understands the point that you just made, and that way as you build on it, she's like able to follow.
No problem.
So you do consider that identifying as trans is a problem?
I think it's a complex issue, and that I think most people would agree that if you're going to introduce the phenomena to children and teach them about something, you have to be willing to teach them about the multitude of possibilities that could be the cause. As far as transgenderism is concerned, I do think it's an open debate as to where that might, the multitude of factors that could inform that are maybe too complex to understand. There's one side which says it's a mental illness. There's another side that says the complete opposite. And who's to say who's right? Nobody knows, right? So if you're going to bring up the existence of something to children, you have to couple that with teaching them the complexity of the cause. And if it's clearly not possible in the case of transgenderism to 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds, how are you going to teach a 7-year-old, for example, about the origins of transgenderism if you're coming from it from the angle of, oh, it's a mental illness? How are you going to teach them if you're coming from the angle of Judith Butler's gender ideology and theory, which is what they're being taught only, by the way? If you're going to introduce school children to the existence of trans people, you have to be prepared to introduce them to the multiple possibilities of where that phenomena is coming from. You can't just say, oh, it's coming from people making a choice, or, oh, this is the real reason. The truth is nobody really knows, okay? And this insistence on one theory of gender ideology, it's one theory that's not been proven that you're teaching children, potentially is destroying their futures. And that's the problem.
Okay. So in terms of teaching this, when you say one gender, even like gender scholars, gender theory, like none of like this, they're not like one like monolith. They're not all in lockstep.
Biased?
What?
Don't you think someone who's a gender scholar or theorist?
For sure. Yeah. Of course, they're going to have their own individual biases, and they're going to disagree with each other. They're going to have their
biological sex.
Let's give
Ryan
a chance to respond.
They're going to have their own ideas. A lot of them disagree with each other about a lot of these things. Absolutely. There are things, however, that we have found some degree of consensus on, especially in the medical field. So when we talk about whether or not being trans, quote unquote, is a mental illness, this was historically how it was categorized, right? But that's not how we categorize it anymore, because we have a better understanding of this now. And what we do categorize as a mental illness, although some people disagree with this, again, it's not a monolith. People disagree about whether or not gender dysphoria is a mental illness. But this is something that we do diagnose. And this is something that if kids are confused by this information, and they're like, oh, well, what if I'm gender dysphoric? Well, then perhaps we can have them talk to a specialist. And most people who go visit these specialists, they actually don't end up being transgender, right? So, they don't end up having gender dysphoria, but some of them do. And we should have those resources available to them, especially when we have pretty decent evidence that if we try to just force it out of them, like try to keep them from ever expressing it, that those results are so much worse.
So to be clear, just really quick, what you're saying is all of this hinges upon us respecting the consensus and the fact that there's no way that consensus could be obfuscated or biased by ideology. So you're saying the consensus arrived by the medical community, in quotes, has nothing to do with ideology, nothing to do with political
Everything
activism.
Has to do with ideology.
Well, I think anyone in good faith could admit that the consensus arrived at by medical bodies on this issue was 100%, at least in part, the result of activism, not because of some impartial and neutral scientific process of review. And the reason I know that is because those scientific researchers in academies who hold dissenting views get canceled and lose their jobs more often than not. Are you even allowed to believe that transgenderism is a mental illness in most of the research institutes and academies and prestigious universities that exist in America. Forget about whether you think it's credible or not. Are you even allowed to entertain that hypothesis in the affirmative? I don't think you are. I think
probably,
you get
but
and there's
what is progression though? Like, let's look back, 100, 200 years ago. I mean, it's like, where does it stop and where does it start? Like, if you look back, women who had any kind of, feeling of like, any women that were suffering from any kind of depression, or any women that were having real true issues because their voices were being silenced, or because they were being controlled by their husbands, or they were forced to, birth 10 children and not have a voice in anything that's going on. What did we used to do to them? We said that they were suffering from hysteria, and we treated them with electrical shock therapy or lobotomies. Like, can we not say that we've progressed now to say, like, well, women aren't just hysterical. Like, I guess they really did have some like valid points. And have we not put into legislation things that have actually furthered that, narrative or belief that people were starting to actually become woke to? Why is this any different? Like, where do you draw the line?
I think it's different because just because things have changed doesn't mean that the logic is just changed for its own sake. For example, in the case of women's rights, usually that has come under the logic of equality, that people want to be equal. But the gender ideology goes further than that. It doesn't just say, oh yeah, we want transgender people to be able to vote, and we want them to have recognized rights. I mean, everyone agrees with that, and that does follow the logic of progress, okay? But now we want to use your public
fund. It stays the same. It's stagnant.
Well, I'm sorry to say, but progress is not just eternal change for its own sake. Change obeys a logic. And the logic of the transgender ideology, or the gender ideology, where it's saying, we want to take your public tax dollar money and use it to teach your children who attend these public schools, because if you can't afford a private school, you're screwed, or you don't have time to homeschool them, you're screwed, okay? Then they are going to be forced to agree or adopt this gender ideology and be exposed to it.
It goes beyond that, though. The bills go beyond that to say we can't talk about it at all. The bills, in Florida, don't say gay bill. It goes beyond that. You're not allowed to talk about different genders.
You don't have a right to talk to people's children on the basis.
That's the core of it. You want to say it's about money, your tax dollars, and that's a lie. The core of it is that you're a bigot.
No, the core of it is you don't have the right to talk to people's children about your sexual beliefs and
so when they ask about different genders, when they see two mommies together, or they have an older brother or sister,
almost all of children's exposure to, let's call it, family life and the realities of gender are things they're going to derive from their homes and from their communities, not from institutions trying to test avant-garde.
So they see it in their homes and their communities, yet they can't talk about it at school.
You just interrupted me. Okay? Yes, because I just told you why. I just told you why.
Just to interrupt, because they can't hear you if you guys are speaking over each other.
Yeah.
I do want to mention really quick, we are going to go into the Q&A shortly, just because we do want to get you guys out of here by a decent time. So I'll give you a chance to respond. Wait, one thing too is we hadn't heard from JF for quite a while. I do want to be sure. JF, if you had any additional thoughts that you want to add.
If he has a response, he should go first, and then
I just want to say really quick. Yeah, the reason it's different from a school versus a family life or a community is because in the case of a school, you're dealing with an institution that's trying to push this avant-garde experimental gender theory and ideology, whereas the observations children are going to make about the reality of sex and gender, they're going to make more organically and more in a grassroots, more in a natural way when they're getting it from their own family life. When they're getting it from this universal standardized institution that doesn't have any regard for people's specific particular realities either, by the way. It's a one-size-fits-all gender ideology they're teaching to everyone.
Okay. Isn't that like what cisgender ideology is? Like literally one size fits all, universal. There's only men, there's only women. This is literally the same thing from the other perspective.
No, it's not. When you're raised in a family and you are exposed to the norm of a father and a mother and a family life and gender roles, that is not the application of some standardized experimental theory. That is the exposure to the natural and organic reality of family life.
But these things have been like socially and legally reinforced for a long time. Like women were second-class citizens until about 100 years ago. Like these things have been really forcefully.
We have tried to make sure that on an institutional level, people have equality regardless of their gender, sex, or race. Okay, they can vote, they can participate in the same universal institutions, but those institutions do not have the right to force themselves on people in the name of a specifically contentious cultural agenda.
Sure. And the last thing I'll say before
it just depends on what your definition of that is.
Sure. And the last thing I'll say before
we can all agree
JF,
it's a contentious cultural.
I think we obviously can't all agree because we're on a debate panel right now.
No, he's right. He's right about like it's contentious. I totally agree it's contentious. I'm very skeptical that there are these like hard line, like this is exactly what like everything about gender is this and this, that are like these are the facts that are being taught in like schools. I just don't think that that's as that's happening in as many places as you're alleging. But JF, go ahead.
The leftists are amazing in how they try to explain everything through oppression by law. The cisgender ideology that Ryan described existed 2 million years ago in a cave, and it didn't need any judge, it didn't need any politician. It is the natural state of things to which any system will converge back to, no matter how hard you try. Because the thing that keeps the species alive is heterosexuality. Every single person is the son or daughter of a heterosexual couple. And the fact is that you two leftists, and all the leftists, or at least a large part of them right now, want to introduce into the brains of children, into a means of communication that was meant for parents to teach things to the next generation so that they can in turn live a heteronormative lifestyle and live successful, reproductive, and happy lives. You guys are trying to intervene in there, block the signal from the parents, and replace it with something that you've concocted in some university with funds from the state. You're not entitled to this. We're defunding you. If you're entitled to defund the police, we're entitled to defunding LGBT activism in our elementary schools. And no matter whether we succeed now or later, we will succeed one day because you guys are not reproductive. You guys are unable to maintain a species. So whatever is the human species 1,000 years from now, I can guarantee you one thing, it's heterosexual.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll
give you the last word, Ryan, and then we got to go to the Q&A.
Sure. So to the millions of years things, the human species isn't millions of years old. It's like maybe 300,000 the earliest humans emerged in Africa. And I promise you that there were homosexual behaviors emerging as well before and after and during and continue and will always exist. The human species isn't turning. We're not all becoming gay. I'm not even gay. And while I sit here and have this whole conversation, I am heterosexual, as we say.
I also am.
Yeah. And I just, I don't think that like there's never been a point where like learning that people could be gay, like changed my mind about whether or not like I was attracted to like female presenting people. Like
you don't know
never happened, you know? Well, I guess,
you don't know.
But sure. Yeah. And someone might, I would say it might be possible that someone understanding or someone finding out that, like homosexuality exists, it might open their mind to considering that they might be homosexual. I don't think that's a bad thing. You do. I don't care.
This is a good time to go into the Q&A. I want to say, folks, if you didn't know, I just put a poll in the live chat on which side you thought was more persuasive tonight. You can click on that poll and vote. So if you're watching over at Radical Coders channel or Infrareds or anywhere else, come on over and put your vote in the poll. We're going to jump into it. Thank you very much for your question. This one coming in from Miles Kinslow says, hey guys, we are now at the point where political opponents are arrested. Society doesn't know what a woman is, and their stupid identity politics is increasing racial tensions and hatred. So yes, the left has gone too far. I think that's for you, Radical Coder and Ashley.
I don't think that like I think identity politics, a lot of these things like are responses. Like JF was kind of complaining at it about like, oh, why is it always about oppression? Well, this is like the thing that we're like looking at is it is the logic of it. It's a dialectic, if you will, as I think like there's this response to like being forced to behave a certain way or being excluded from a certain part of society that you have no justifiable reason to be excluded from, except for that like people don't like the way that you express yourself or that you present yourself. Of course people are going to push back against that. Like you're always going to see that. In terms of the racial stuff, I mean, we are were like dude, the civil rights movement was like 60 years ago. Like Ruby Bridges is still like a lot of these people are a lot of these things that happen are very much not sorry, they're not ancient history. They influence people's lives. There are people alive today who like voted to prevent black kids from being allowed into white schools. You know, like
and there are still people who believe
and they still want that.
vehemently.
Like we didn't solve racism, and the disparities certainly demonstrate this as well. I mean, whether it's healthcare,
I also don't think it's
fair
to compare gender and race, exactly and exclusively.
Sure.
I'm just saying
they're definitely different. I agree, but there are similarities in the way that the
that
law
people
and
react to it,
them,
and that
This one coming in from Summer Rowe. Good to see you. It says, to the Yes team, does advancement in technology and quote-unquote quality of life measure naturally come with some level of leftist politics? If yes, what period in history would you model your ideal society on?
It's very hard to say. Perhaps some of the improvements of our lives within the last 100 years have been partly caused by leftism. I tend to think, though, that most of what leftism is a system of parasitism and drainage, where they show up in a society that has already built success through the free market, and then they build leftism. They build, for example, the educational system in a way that drains this success and eventually shuts it down. But perhaps there are things like giving education to people who in a free market world wouldn't have had it. Perhaps that helps them in some form, but the fact is that they shouldn't be educated. As we've seen through my statistics, they are not helpable.
This one coming in from, appreciate it, Ethan Osborne says, Haas, why do you lick Imperial U.S. police boots? Support segregation and theocracy?
Spicy.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you're talking about for the two things. I don't support racial segregation. I don't support American imperialism. I've been deplatformed from my opposition toward it. But as far as, what was the last thing he said?
So they said, Haas, why do you lick Imperial U.S. police boots? And then also theocracy?
Oh, because it's based. I don't know. I mean, what are you asking? Like, why do I support theocracy? Well, I think we're going to have to grapple with the fact that we've never really escaped religion, and we don't really live in a secular state either here in America or anywhere in the world, really. So that's kind of my view.
That reminds me, folks, all of our guests are linked in the description. So if you haven't yet, check out their links. That is including at the podcast, as we put all of these debates on the Modern Day Debate podcast that you can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. So regardless of where you're listening, you can find our guests, Ashley, Radical Coder, Infrared, and JF's links in the description box. This one coming in from Summer Rowe, strikes again, says, to all debaters, do you see a resurgence of right-wing politics in the mainstream during our lifetime? If yes, how do you envision it manifesting?
I think we've kind of seen in 2016 the start of a rise of a new generation of a new type of right-wingers that we hadn't heard for a couple of decades. Whether it's going to keep the momentum, I don't know. It's hard. We got censorship that hit us, but we might come back hard, mostly through the evolutionary forces that favor us. Conservatives just make more babies.
I'll agree with Jeff that we saw this rise of this new. I call it. I after I did a Google search for this, apparently, although a lot of other people too call it this as well, but I consider it like a kind of like postmodern neo-fascism.
You got it. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think, I agree with others when they say it's already been gaining traction. But I think actually it's going to encounter a limit, and that limit is going to be after one makes it clear that they reject the cultural agenda of the left. Is that really the end of politics and the end of, ideology at that point? I think I see it actually as a clean slate for a new beginning, instead of an endpoint. Because I don't think a politics exclusively defined by rejecting the left is viable. Because, To give you an example really quick, Ron DeSantis is trying to co-opt Trump's MAGA thing, and it's just based on reacting to the left's culture agendas, which everyone already agrees we reject. So that I just don't think it's enough, right? That's my view.
I think that anytime that I do agree also that we've seen a resurgence of the extreme right wing I guess quote unquote old school beliefs, but I think that anytime that a revolution or change is coming, that you're going to incite response from some of the most extreme people that are in our nation. So I think that it makes sense why we see so much anger and pushback, because you're trying to make change. I think that that's just in history. Any great changes that have ever been made have come through revolution, and that's always backed by a lot of passion, a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, and a lot of personal experience, which makes it more passionate. So I that's my 2 cents on that.
You got it. Summer Rose strikes yet again, says, JF, do you see multiculturalism as a lost cause? Why or why not? Can't we educate people from different backgrounds to become productive and non-envious to our society, just as we do for people with dyslexia, for example?
Well, it's a lost cause in the very long term and under our current societal functioning, because we have democracy, and democracy reduces systematically to a digital fight between the center left and the center right, no matter how zoomed in you take. And within that fight, within that binary fight, it's very bad to have people with extremely different sets of interests, like the blacks of America, the whites of America. So it creates too many conflicts in too many dimensions for politics to resolve well in those cases. So no, it's not viable multiculturalism.
Gotcha. This one from Light of the Twin Lamps says, clockwise, starting from top left. You say, okay, let's see. Just have to be sure that these are appropriate nicknames. Female NPC, that's not too bad. Is female a bad word nowadays? I heard it. Just someone yesterday corrected me. They said I'm not supposed to say male and female anymore. It's like men and women you're only supposed to say.
They were probably a leftist.
Here's my advice. If you're gonna call women females, like a lot of it, you're gonna make a lot of them like really uncomfortable. So,
really? What if I call them
females?
What if I call males like guys males?
Yeah, I think that's kind of weird as well. Like it's kind of a very scientific way to refer to like a human being. You know, like it's.
Oh,
I
really?
call myself a female all the time.
Sure.
Huh. All right. Well, and NPC, Ashley, in case you didn't know, that means you're a non-playable character. They think that you just read the script of the left verbatim, and that's basically your function. Ashley, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's definitely my function. All I do is exactly what Radical Coder tells me to. He sends it over ahead of time. I read it, and then I just make sure that that's exactly what I portray online.
And in return, I get feet pics.
Don't worry,
yes,
they've got other insults. They say wall of text simp. I think that's Radical Coder. What does this mean? Do you guys know what this means?
Yeah, he's definitely a simp. He's my simp. Yeah.
Yeah, wall of text just means that I guess I said a lot of.
You're just
things.
Going on and on and on.
Yeah,
basically, he said a whole bunch.
I have a lot to say. I'm passionate about this stuff. I care a lot about these issues. I think they're really important. Yeah.
Infrared, they call you Chad. I think that's supposed to. I have a feeling.
Oh, that one's for me actually. That makes sense.
This is one of your fans. Now, JF, I don't. They say Boomer Coomer. Is this? That's not good, is it?
A boomer coomer. No, there's really no good way to phrase it. Frame it.
That's God. Thank you very much. But yes, thank you, Light of the Twin Lamps, for your support. You're all in love. It's a term of endearment that they call you a coomer, JF. But we do want to say our guests are linked in the description, folks. Even if you're at the podcast. Ethan Osborne says, Haas, since you think climate change is a hoax, why don't you get certified and join me on the front lines of the wildfires this season? Training is free, bro. Let's see what you're made of.
Am I even allowed to talk about this topic on YouTube? Or
are you allowed to? Because we hosted one like a year ago, but that's funny you say that because I was just thinking during this debate, like in the first, somebody said something that made me think of global warming, and I was like, I wonder if we could do that topic anymore. Because A year ago, it was fine. Certainly 5 years ago, it was fine. But I was like, I don't. That might be
Yeah,
one.
I'll first of all, I don't deny climate change, but I do have skepticism of the whole, oh, it's all driven by carbon emissions. I'm just slightly skeptical of it. But I'll tell you what, if you're just going to have such a superficial analysis, I'll do that when you come to my home in Michigan every winter when there's a snowstorm and you shovel my driveway. And if you shovel my driveway and pour ice on the road so I don't slip and fall or whatever, then I'll help you out wherever you are in California. So I think it's only fair.
Super interesting. This one coming in from Thunderstorm says, I'm neither right nor left. The left seems like a cult, though. They say only hiring their own from colleges in government and corporations, using the poor and minorities as a political tool that they never actually help. We'll give you a chance, Radical Coder and Ashley. I'm guessing
I think that could be easily said for both sides. I think that could, I mean, honestly, everything that was just said could also be applied to the right. 100%.
I would definitely agree that like a Democratic Party like doesn't do enough to like actually help people. I'm pro things like reparations and stuff. It's literally like unpaid labor that has put people in like worse positions in life, and all the things that piled on top of that unpaid labor, that like things like that are I don't know, fine with it.
Gotcha. Someone told me that if you use the word female, it makes you like a Ferengi in the Star Trek show. Are they like autistic type aliens? Do I come off as autistic if I say female? I don't know.
So it depends. I think a lot of it depends on context, but it can.
Oh,
I call myself a female. I think
it's a little different, but I understand.
It's like the technical term, so you sound like robotic or something because it's okay. I get it now. That's okay. Ethan Osborne says, Haas, I'm not drunk this time, bro. What does that mean? I don't know. Haas, do you recognize this individual?
Ethan, no, what are they saying?
Did you have some sort of drunken encounter with him in the past? He says, Haas,
I've debated a lot of drunk leftists on my show before. Like they come in my VC and they kind of just are drunk, but anyone in my community recognize? I don't.
Ethan Osborne is their name, but I also have to say, folks, we want to say thank you guys so much, and I have to say thank you to the speakers, because all of our speakers, they've been on here more than once. The speakers are the lifeblood of the channel, and I just want to say, you guys, the reason I'm wearing this suit, do people know the reason? I put a couple Easter eggs in today's debate. One, I'm wearing a suit. Do you guys not know why?
It's 100K. You guys hit 100K.
I'm celebrating. By the way, this is my way of celebrating. Is I was like, should I call friends? We go out to dinner or something. I was like, no, you know what? I'm gonna be with the channel to celebrate. So I am thankful to get to celebrate with you guys. It happened this morning. The folks, that audience, my friends, the speakers are the lifeblood of the channel. So we really do. We want to give all the credit to them, because if this was just me debating myself every night, it'd be terrible. The other thing is, there's another Easter egg. In the names, I put Ashley S. Do you guys recognize what show that reference is? Okay, this one from Sommer. He says, to all debaters, do you feel well represented by the political parties in your area? What would your ideal political party look like? I don't know if he means, like, what would their race be? Or if he means, like, what would their ideology be? Probably that. Just that. Let's go with
that.
Personally, I feel split. I feel torn 50-50. I don't know what the ideal political party would look like. I'm going to go out and say that I don't identify as Democrat or Republican. I don't agree with everything the Democrats do, and I don't agree with everything the Republicans do. Just to touch briefly, like I am a gun owner, for instance. Like I am all about like less government control, the better. So I used to identify a lot with the Republican Party. And when I started seeing some of the ways that they were controlling people even harder in some areas than I feel like the Democratic Party or than the Republican Party, or vice versa, Democratic Party was, then I started kind of, I don't know. I don't know what it would look like, but I know that this ain't it. I know that just Republican or just Democrat ain't it. I don't know exactly. Like I have a lot of thoughts, but I'd have to go on for like a 30-minute spiel, and we don't have time for that. I don't know exactly, but I'm not a yellow dog either one. I will say that. There were some questions brought up today that I didn't. There were some questions I have that weren't brought up today. I didn't get to go on that, but one really important thing, what is a woman? I think that in general, anybody that you look at, that you meet on the street and you think, that's probably a woman. Like that is some quote unquote female characteristics, feminine characteristics. I think that that's what we could say as a woman. I think that we all know that there are feminine characteristics and masculine characteristics. If you tend to have more masculine characteristics, my brain would associate, oh, okay, male. If you had more feminine or female characteristics, my brain would automatically go, oh, female. So I'm sorry, but that's just a question that's been brought up a lot. We didn't get into, and I really wanted to say, like, I don't think it's that hard, guys.
Yeah, in terms of like feeling represented, I definitely compared to the Republicans, yeah, I mean Democrats look like angels, but in terms of like the societal goals, I mean we got such a long way to go, there's like so much to be done, and Democrats are a lot of times like dragging their feet, and I just think we need to put more pressure on our politicians to like do more to help people and help. I mean, Biden ended like child poverty briefly, which is a bizarre sentence to say. Like we briefly ended child poverty, right? And then that act or whatever the bill was, like it expired, I guess, and like it wasn't renewed. And it's like why would you just let that go? Like we were literally like feeding, like everyone was able to eat. Like that's really important. I think a lot of people are underrepresented. A lot of people don't have access to the voting booth very much. A lot of Republicans are like, again, we talked about over 250 bills that are forcing people out of, or like making it harder and harder for people to vote. And there's a million other things like that I would like to see more people be represented. I like inclusion and diversity and all these things, diversity of opinions and diversity of all the other traits. Like I like people. I think that it's better when there's more people that I can interact with and learn from, and who can make the world a better place around me. And I don't see why any good reason to stop, like hinder people from thriving. I definitely strongly disagree with JF that a lot of these people are like lost causes, and I think that's frankly I think it's rooted in some beliefs about certain groups of people that he holds on to, but it's neither here nor there, I guess.
Anybody else on that question?
So I would just say really quick, I would like a explicitly working class centered third party that just says, we need to put the interests of the working class at the fore, and no compromises as far as, culture, politics, upholding the mass line, the popular line. I'd like to see a populistic party that's not beholden to the special interests or, the ruling class, but that's just me.
What I'd like to have is an anti-redistributionist party, and our slogan would be, even when you're starving, we ain't helping.
You got it. Thank you very much for this question. Coming in from Light of the Twin Lamps says, why does the left want open borders for masses from third world who do not share the same tolerance of the LGBT?
Well, I mean, I'll first of all say I don't think there's like any U.S. politician who has advocated or like for open borders. Like I don't know exactly what that policy even looks like. But in terms of like people being able to like move here, like that's probably good. A lot of people do have regressive views on a lot of things that I think they should evolve their views on. But I would say we do see that, especially for example, the Muslim community in America is generally more progressive on LGBTQ stuff than even at least a few years ago, the Mormons, although the Mormons did come out.
I got to push back on that.
The Mormons did come out backing the defensive Defensive Marriage Act or whatever it was.
It's not true.
Okay. That's from the data I saw. It was.
I'm around Dearborn, Michigan right now, and I can tell you There was a huge controversy over a lot of LGBT literature in school libraries.
Mhm.
And that became like a huge national controversy. And the Muslim community is very much still like extremely hostile to that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to. I wasn't saying otherwise. I do think there is a lot of like the more conservative side of that. Absolutely, I agree, and they're in lockstep with the Christians who hate them so much and who tried to ban them from coming in here when Trump had his Muslim ban that was overturned after 7 days.
This one coming in from, do appreciate it. Go ahead, Ashley. I didn't mean to.
I was just going to say that the human in me wants open borders, but I guess the American in me supports strict border rules. So.
You got it. And heads up, folks, we can't take any more questions. We want to get our guests out of here tonight. We're a little bit over already what I was hoping to get us out of here by. But this one from Dustin Buck says, Ashley and Radical Coder, why don't you give your belongings to minorities?
I have many times. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot. So
yeah, everything I own is behind me. You can see it all. I gave it all. I gave it all to a black guy down the road.
I'm actually glad they asked that. Like I have done many. I have helped spearhead many. Like when Ryan was talking about children in America that are going hungry, and at the time I lived in a very Republican conservative town in Oklahoma. One might even call like one of the more like rich towns, like people that had a lot of money. It was and I did an entire program, or helped spearhead an entire program anyways, that we would pack snacks and food and things for kids during spring break, because a lot of these kids during spring break, they don't have food in their homes. Their parents are working, they're going home, and they don't have snacks or things to eat like they're able to get at school. So I do actually do more than just sit here in a corner of my room and talk about these things. I actually believe in them, and I do support a lot LGBTQ. I support poverty, and I do my part as well as I can with the resources I have to help make the world around me a better place. And I really encourage and implore you to do the same, whoever asked that question.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, because I memed a little bit at the beginning of the question, but first of all, I don't really make much money right now. I'm not exactly rolling in it. But even if I was, I don't think that like individual donations are gonna, like, that's gonna like serve as like the reparations and the investments that I think are needed in a lot of these communities to make real change and give them the agency to make the changes that they want to see. So yeah.
Were you being sarcastic earlier though, Ryan, or were you being? Maybe you were being sincere.
I own more than what you see behind me. I have Rubik's cubes.
No, not that. Did I hear you right? I thought you said that you, and I'm not joking. I really thought you said this. This is why I'm asking. I was like, really? Like, or was it? Did you say you gave all of your stuff away to a black guy on Reddit?
Yes, I was memeing. I was memeing. It was a joke. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, young kids, for teaching me the memes. And this one coming in, that's a meme? Okay. This one from Ben Nowak says, question, Ashley, do you believe the deadly spread of the quote, the left's woke mind virus may be an explanation for the Fermi paradox? Well, what the heck is the Fermi paradox?
The Fermi paradox?
The Fermi paradox means that basically what happened is that if you believe in life on other planets, there's a paradox. So like if there is intelligent life on other planets, they would have visited us by now, right? We would have evidence of that, which I know that there's a lot of controversy behind that, but we would have hardcore evidence. Now, the Fermi paradox basically is saying many different things, but one of the things in my interpretation of this question is the Fermi paradox in this instance. One of the theories is that, yes, there is and has been intelligent life on other planets that equates to or advances us, but that society basically did what we see a lot of right now happening across the world, which is where they basically destroyed themselves. If you want to call that nuclear war, everybody's gone. And so that either they're gone or they're starting over from square one again. And that's why we haven't actually seen them. So my interpretation is like this woke mindset where we're trying to just get all inclusive, everybody all together. Do I believe that what we're doing in turn is completely destroying ourselves? No, I don't, because I think that that's a theory. And I think that at the end of the day, if you practice trying to accept others and trying to be a good person and improve the world around you, that a lot of that would include, almost all of that would include respecting others' choices to be who and what they want to be, as long as that's not harming other people inherently, you're not out there just actually destroying lives, literally, then no, I don't think that it is. I don't think it equates to the Fermi paradox. Thank you for the question.
This one,
I don't think that the woke mind virus could explain the Fermi paradox. I have my own opinion on other life forms out there, and I don't think it's a point of convergence of much life forms. Leftism is basically an accident of history that will last a couple of 100 years. It will be gone, and most of our history as a species will be heterosexual.
Leftism and progressive values will exist as long as there are people pushing against them.
This one coming in from the Tinfoil Freak says, if right-leaning people in government are good with money, why is the national debt and economic situation worse once a conservative gets in office?
I think I'll answer really quick, just one point of view that's maybe a little against the left policy. But if you do look a lot of times at whoever is now in office, and then you look at the policies that were put in place by the people that were there before them, a lot of times that is more reflective of the economic state of things. So I don't think that that's a exactly accurate statement or question. But anyway.
Anybody else?
I kind of missed the question. So do you want to read it again? I'll try.
Well, I think it's more for infrared, or especially JF, because infrared's technically more socialist, if I understand right. Communist. At least you're at least not a conservative. So for JF, they said, if right-leaning people in government are good with money, why is it that the economic situation and national debt get worse once a conservative gets in office?
Oh, well, because there's a contradiction in term between right-wing and government. A true right-winger wouldn't be in the government. A true right-winger would abolish the government. So what you see, these Republicans that are poorly managing our state, they are statists, and therefore they are communist, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. Right-wingers should not be in the government. You guys should all leave. That'd be awesome.
Well, and there's the problem. As long as they think like this, I'd rather go into the government and destroy what I can. But when you look,
they can go in and just like be like decent people, and I think a lot of them are, but a lot of things they're doing are not decent, you know. So I don't know. I wish they'd stop doing that, and I wouldn't say the things I just said.
This one from Go Away says, when I was 4 years old, I knew I was a libertarian. Thank you for that. And Night Shift 10,000 says, question for Infrared and JF. Is taxation theft? In one word.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Justifiably.
I didn't. Okay. Well, are you? Okay. This one coming in from CE says, Infrared, are you a Muslim?
Yes, I am.
Wow.
Based.
This one coming in from Robin Hood 6143. I believe that gender ideology is sexist, and as to rely on the belief of a soul that predates the mind. I am a vegan, atheist, anti-natalist, but I think the left is going too far on the gender thing.
Disagree.
Disagree.
Wow. Super interesting. Amelia says, why can't leftists address the fact that if leftism and the LGBTQ plus was developed genuinely, then why do they need reactionary institutions of parasitic ruling class to survive?
I mean, like gay and trans people exist, and the institutions like that have recently started to recognize and acknowledge their existence and push back against the traditional view of these things that they should be suppressed. I mean, like you have to have we didn't get like civil rights with like no institutional backing. You have to have this forming of this combining of like activists and intersecting interests and all sorts of things that I mean I don't know. You need institutional power to push back against institutional forces, right?
I think that it did develop genuinely. I think, again, I'll go back to, it's just the more people that hear about, hey, there's other people out there like me. I just don't like saying that it didn't develop genuinely. Like, oh, right. I'm just going to identify as another gender because, it's so cool to do that right now. Like, I just really want to be ostracized and,
well, I mean, to be
have
fair,
one of the highest, have one of the highest, levels of suicide that's out there.
Violence
you know, like
against
this sounds
individuals.
so fun.
Given how small
I
that
think it's
exception
genuine.
is, whatever your views on it, the transgender phenomena was always very small, and suddenly it's become so big. And
again, like you haven't
that's not a genuine reason.
You're not saying that people weren't out there before. You're just saying that the more that other people know that there's more people like them, and that they're not going to be, you know, hanged from trees. That is the proper.
When was anyone being subjected to that?
When has there been hate crimes against the homosexual community?
No,
get the fuck out of town, Haas.
Well, first of all, we're talking about the transgender phenomena specifically. I don't think people were being.
It all goes hand in hand. Any kind of LGBTQ plus. I think that there's a level, which you could call this genuine or disingenuous. I don't know, but I think that there's a level of progression. Meaning,
all right,
like,
you know, I'm just gonna go out on a limb. I'm just gonna go out on a limb.
You asked me a question. I'm trying to answer.
I'm
trying to answer your question if I can. That it was more acceptable, you know, quote unquote, like maybe back in 2014, 2015, we were starting to accept just like gay or homosexual as being, you know, more acceptable. It's progression, it's progress, it's the woke mind virus, you know.
Yeah, gay marriage just passed.
But I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the reason every major corporation in America has pushed this agenda is not just because of progress.
Every major.
Every single one.
This one,
even Bud Light, if you can believe it, they're printing on their beer cans.
You know why? Because transgender people like to drink too.
They sure do.
That's just called marketing.
Listen. The majority of consumers of Bud Light, in particular, are probably not the demographic you want to reach out to in terms of virtue signaling this issue. So I have to say, I'm going to go out on a limb. I could be wrong.
Have their sales declined?
Could be wrong.
Are they going into bankruptcy now?
Because I'm pretty sure they have ulterior motives, but I could be wrong.
We must move on. Tank Sista says, great job on the debate, Haas. It's unfortunate that you had to team with JF. Oh, come on. He's sitting right here. I am surprised.
There's a lot I disagree with, but you know, there was a lot of good points made too, so you know.
I was gonna say I'm surprised that you guys agreed on an awful lot. This one from One-Eyed Heathen says, everyone, what do you think we can do to improve our media literacy? Right or left?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we just gotta help more people do like better critical thinking. I mean, you know, I wouldn't even necessarily just call it critical thinking. Like thinking should be critical, you know. And I don't think we engage, or like we're incentivized to engage with media in that way generally. I mean, a lot of it comes to those incentives, I guess. So I'd like to give people the tools to break down things better, and just goes along with more education.
To piggyback off of what he said is that don't just believe everything you hear. Don't take it at face value. Do your own research. Read articles. Read studies from opposing points of view and points of view that support your own preconceived mindset as well. And then, you know, compare the two, and then come up with what you believe to be fair and just.
Research over research.
Yeah.
I would say combat censorship and decentralize the process of truth finding, so that we're all on Twitter, we're all disconnected from each other, we come to our own conclusions, and we have a collective way of expressing it that is not controlled by leftist CEOs at Twitter or Facebook.
Yeah, noted leftist Elon Musk, okay?
This one
he's a leftist. I mean, he's an environmentalist leftist.
Yeah.
I think when we're talking about media literacy, there's no way to promote that, because there's no institution that's going to be neutral enough to do that. So honestly, I would tell you, you know, what's going on with this media polarization. I'm an accelerationist. Let's hit the gas pedal, because there's no way to reverse it. So let's just see where it's going to take us, because there's nothing we can do to stop it. So decentralized, total free speech, you know what I mean? No way to resist the wild nature of information.
I like free speech.
This one from Chris Morlock says, for Ashley and Radical, would you agree if LGBTQ people are not reproducing biologically speaking, their main way of growing their movement is ideological recruitment outside of a family relationship?
No, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, no, I again, like if people like how if people learn words to describe the things that they're already feeling, and then they use those words to describe the things they're feeling, that's not like you're just giving people, again, you're just giving people words to describe what they're experiencing. I don't know. It's not like you're not brainwashing them into being gay or trans.
I don't think that the more people that might come out as, gay or trans or bi or any of that, I don't think that at the end of the day it's actually going to stop human reproduction. Like the idea that like the more that people know about this or accept it, that the more people are just going to do it. It sounds like some closeted homosexual like feelings, in my opinion. It sounds like you yourself might think, oh my God, if I'm really going to keep being exposed to all of these transgender people, then I myself am going to become transgender or gay. Like, I don't think so. Like, I like penises and I enjoy having sex with men. I have had children and I still accept these things. Like, are people that are so against it, like, you really believe that like this ideology, like the idea that like people can have other genders is really just going to infect the world, and that no one else is ever going to want to have.
We're talking about children, we're just talking about children.
Okay, so as a child, like, even like, you think that these children are going to just be like, oh man, okay, cool.
Yeah,
like, I guess if I can believe that. I guess if you were exposed to this as a child, maybe you'd be gay now. I don't know.
They say 1/4 of the Zoomers are not even straight. So clearly,
you know what else? Like, I think
maybe
that
they're
a lot of
deconstructing
people
sexuality.
can play with their sexuality.
I don't know.
A lot of people can play with their sexuality if it's more acceptable. But at the end of the day, like, when they're 25 to 35, like, if they're going to decide, like, okay, what gender or sexuality am I really? Do I want to have a family? Do I want to do X, Y, and Z?
If you make life-altering decisions, like taking.
That's not what the question is asking, huh?
Yeah, and it was for like I was just gonna add, like, I don't know, I have a lot of gay friends. I have a lot of friends of all under the rainbow, and I've spent a lot of time with these people. It's never made me enjoy sex with women less.
We'll jump to the next one. Thanks. This one coming in from, by the way, I just got an idea. Couple of things. One, I asked if anybody recognized the reference of Ashley S. It's from the show Recess. Come on. Oh. Does anybody you remember Recess?
I
JF? Did you watch Recess?
I like it.
JF? No? Oh, okay. This is what we other thing is, I'm going to put a poll in the comments. I just thought of a way to do it on YouTube. So, folks, do want to encourage you to come over to Modern Day Debate, post your vote, or I should say put your vote in the poll, which will be in the comments after this debate. This one from Summer Rose says, Ryan, isn't an eternal cry of toxic leftists to, quote, follow the science? Or isn't that their eternal cry? He says, why do you not weight the word of the PhD scientist in front of you more highly than your own?
Well, I mean, in general, I would give like a PhD scientist about a specific topic a little bit more weight about that topic specifically. But I mean, I would also, like, you wouldn't just take like one person's opinion on those things. That would actually be the what people call the appeal to authority fallacy. The fallacy there is when you're appealing to like one individual rather than like a body of people who have kind of come to this conclusion. And that doesn't mean their conclusions are infallible by any means, but it's certainly more reliable than just like one dude's opinions about like biological determinism or whatever.
Also, there were a lot of Nazis that were scientists and doctors.
So
should we have just believed in everything that they thought was correct?
You got it.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't, in fact, always trust the science.
Yes, or we shouldn't trust
You shouldn't trust anything in
science. Yeah.
This one coming in from Dustin Buck says, Riley Gaines was just attacked by a leftist mob. Who's Riley Gaines?
She is a speaker for TPUSA, who's an athlete who lost to Leah Thomas, the trans swimmer who won in the women category. And she feels that she has been robbed of a medal for competing with a biological male.
Maybe she should have trained harder.
This one coming in, she's jacked. Like if anybody's ever been jacked, I'm like,
I think that's a complicated issue. I am being a little tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, that would be a lot for me to get into, because I have some ideas of both sides a little bit on that. But yeah,
it's a difficult thing.
She's very fit. This one coming in from Dustin. We got Summer Rose says, we got that one. Void Baum says, to the left, how do you reconcile your stance on LGBT as revolutionary when it coincides with multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies and Ford Foundation funded think tanks?
Sure. So I don't form my beliefs about I don't form my beliefs based on what those companies push for. Historically, a lot of major corporations probably wouldn't have pushed for these things, but it seems they do now, probably because there's a broader acceptance that these people exist, that they should be allowed in society. A lot more people are coming to understand that they know someone who falls under these categories in their own lives, and that helps change their views of them in the same way that being around people who look different from you can change your views about those people as well. So we're going to see more acceptance, and I think there's kind of a, maybe it can appear as if there's more support than there really is when a lot of these major corporations, because they are doing it for profit, of course, because that's what they care about. It's capitalism, baby, which I'm not the biggest fan of at the end of the day. They're chasing the dollars, and the dollars at this point are coming from people who are a little bit more progressive than I guess that a lot of people want them to be.
I think that all politics are controlled by capitalism right now. So I think that question is made specifically by somebody that wants to try to tear apart another person's ideology based on a double standard. I don't think that's a genuine question. I think that's hey, this is being supported more by big corporations and pharmaceuticals. But if you look back throughout the history, it hasn't everything. So I think that goes down to capitalism. I don't think that it has so much to do with human rights.
You got it. Last one. Thanks very much. Agent Black said, no questions, just a tiny drop in the bucket. Love you all. Thanks for your support, Agent Black. That means more than you know. And want to say huge thank you to our guests. Folks, they really are the lifeblood of the channel. They are what make this channel fun. So I want to say huge thank you. They're linked below. Ashley, Radical Coder, Infrared, and JF. It's been a true pleasure.
Always, James.
Thanks
Congrats again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, JF. Thanks, Haas. It was good talking to you guys.
Juicy to say the least. I'll be back with a very quick post-credit scene, folks. You don't want to miss it. We'll be talking about this upcoming conference, so stick around, and I'll be back in just amazing. My dear friends, I want to say thanks for being with us. I am going to switch it over. Bear with me here. I'm just moving a couple things around, rearrange a little deal. Want to say we are excited to have you here. I'm going to give you a little update about, I had mentioned that conference. I've got to tell you guys, we're excited. This is huge. This conference, it's super encouraging that, man, just so many good and big things happening at Modern Day Debate lately. I'm super encouraged, super excited about the future. As I got to tell you, this conference, it's going to be big. It's going to be in Fort Worth, Texas on Saturday, April 22nd. You don't want to miss this one. And you might be like, well, James, cool. It's in Fort Worth, but I can't make that. Well, maybe you can't, because maybe, for example, do you know the biggest city out of all the views that we have on Modern Day Debate? The biggest city is London. We have more views from London than New York City, for example. And they're not too differently sized. So that's crazy. I can't remember how big the London metro is. But long story short, my dear friends, you were maybe like, well, James, I can't watch from London. I can't, do this thing live. I would say, hey, no problem. You can watch the entire debate at home. We have a crowdfund link that I am putting into the description box. If you put just $1 into the crowdfund, that helps us cover the cost of the venue as well as the flights for the speakers. And that crowdfund, as I mentioned, I just put it in the top of the chat. It's also in the description box for all of our debates if you ever need to come back to it. That gets you into the entire debate for the entire day live. So in other words, if you put in just $1, what we do is we will email you the live links for this debate, or I should say conference. So all 4 debates that are happening at the conference. So that's really cool, is that, I mean, hey, that's pretty cheap. You can't get anything for $1 nowadays. Even the Dollar Tree. It's the $1.25 tree now. That's what they say is everything's $1.25. Do you know that? For real. But want to say we are excited about the future. I want to say hello to you in the old live chat. Cancel Culture Vulture, thanks for coming by. Says 100,000 subs. Like the stream. Thanks for your support. Seriously, Cancel Culture Vulture, that means a lot. And Samar says, any date for the political debate side of DebateCon yet? Yes. We're planning on doing it in the first 2 weekends, one of the first 2 weekends of June. So that's still being ironed out, but highly likely that we're going to do it. Worst case scenario, it gets pushed to fall. It depends, frankly, on when we hear back from this venue. There's a venue that's perfect for us, I think, because we're kind of going out on a limb here. This one's going to be in the Northeast. So in June, we're going to be out in the Northeast, basically between Philly and New York City. So that's going to be big. I'll update you as I learn more. I'm excited for it. And Burf, good to see you there in the live chat. Happy to have you here. Thanks for your kind words. James Spock says, James, you'd be an excellent comedian. I appreciate that. Seriously, that means a lot. I don't know if that's true, but I do appreciate your kind words. And Anthony's Thinking, thanks for coming by. Says, glad I got to catch one live. We are glad that you caught it live, too. That makes it fun. Huey Long, thanks for coming by. I see you there. Is it Bass or Bass? I see you there in the live chat. Agent Black, thanks for coming by. Says, you're getting more than that from me, James. Very cool indeed. Thanks, Agent Black. Seriously, we appreciate it. This crowdfund, let me show you guys the details of the crowdfund, because you might be like, oh, James, how does that work exactly? I don't know what the crowdfund, like what it is or how you guys do this. This is my first time. I'll show you. This will make it as easy as possible. So I'm going to pull this up. As you can see on screen, along with me here in the bottom left of your screen, the links to the in-person tickets are in the description box. And that includes, I should say, the link to the in-person tickets. It's Eventbrite that we use, as well as the link to the crowdfund that I mentioned. But let me start from the top. So as I mentioned, we have our conference 3.1 coming up this very Saturday, April 22nd in Fort Worth, Texas. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be huge. But not only that, because you might be like, well, James, what exactly is this conference? Well, let me show you, because you might be thinking like, I'm kind of confused. Like on screen, these are the 4 debates that are going to happen at that conference. For example, at the very top, right above me, I should say on the far left, David Wood versus Kenny Bomer on whether or not Muhammad's marriage to Aisha was ethical. That is going to be controversial if the YouTube channel for Modern Day Debate gets yeeted. In other words, if you don't see us the next day on YouTube, that's probably the debate that did it, because allegedly Aisha was 9 years old. So that is going to be a juicy debate. You don't want to miss it. As well as Aaron Raw versus Tom Jump on whether religion does more harm than good. You don't want to miss that one. And by the way, I love that YouTube is testing out this new feature where if you're looking at your live chat, you can click the little heart button. I just saw somebody doing it just a second ago. I do see those. I hope you know that. So I don't know if you guys, I saw it throughout the debate. They tested it once where I saw it. Some of you might have this feature. Some of you may not. It's the feature where basically you can actually click a little heart button or other different buttons, and they'll show up on the live stream, which is cool. Or I should say in the live chat. Now, other debates, Matt Dillahunty versus Hussein Embers on whether or not Islam is true. That's going to be a big debate. You don't want to miss that one. It's going to be a lot of fun. My dear friends, we're excited. I mean, this is big stuff. This conference stuff, we're getting better at it, I would say. At Modern Day Debate, we're learning how to do it better, so it's better quality. So we have better cameras for this one. We have better, you can say a better sound setup so that you'll be able to hear all of the questions from the audience. But yes, it's all of those debates. The last one, Inspiring Philosophy and Daniel Hakikachu on whether or not child marriage is acceptable. I saw those hearts in the live chat. Thanks for pressing that button again. And I got to tell you, though, not only that, you might be like, well, okay, I think I know what DebateCon is, but what is Indiegogo? Well, if you're new to Indiegogo, I've got to show you this. First, let me show you the Eventbrite page. If you're new to that, Eventbrite is just a website that's a third-party website that we use to sell the in-person tickets. So I'm showing you like the homepage for, if you click on that link in the description box, this is what you'll see. So I encourage you, if you haven't yet, check it out. Get your in-person tickets. You do not want to miss this one. But you might be like, oh, okay, now I think I get it. But, you know, James, what is Indiegogo? You mentioned that, and I'm a boomer, so I don't know what that means. Don't worry, I'll tell you what it means. Indiegogo is a crowdfund platform just like Kickstarter. Basically, this is where we are raising funds for this conference, because believe it or not, some people, I think they think like, oh no, like throwing a conference like this is easy. It's not easy. It's actually, we love doing it. It's a fun challenge, and I love challenging things in my life, but at the same time, it is financially risky because it's a pretty big investment in terms of all the costs. It's about, I think I did the math today, and it's about $7,000, which is like, so we're counting on that coming back through in-person ticket sales and through the crowdfund. We are confident that it will come back. We appreciate your guys' support. If you put into the crowdfund, those funds are being used to cover the flights for the speakers, their hotel nights, the venue cost. If we happen to have extra funds beyond our $3,000 goal, they're reinvested into the next conference in June. If you are curious and you're like, James, I want to know, like, how do I ensure that? Because you might be like, James, what if you guys have like $1,000 extra? Does that mean that you're going to go to Las Vegas and have a vacation for 2 nights doing all sorts of strange, degenerate things? No. The reason is Sideshow Nav, who's not in the chat tonight, but he is usually here. He's our head mod. He has moral, you could say, accountability in terms of being able to see the finances, where it's ensured that that extra $1,000 is reinvested back into our conference. So the next one. Now, for the Indiegogo, though, you may be like, okay, I think I get what Indiegogo is, but is it a pain to sign up, James? Actually, you can sign up and create an account, or if it's easier and you're like, I don't want to go through the trouble of that, you can just sign in with Facebook. It's that easy. It's just a piece of cake. Boom. It's this expedited sign-in process. Highly encourage you if you want to do that. It makes it a little bit easier, because you might be like, I don't want to, giving them my email and my account and all that. Like, well, okay, just use Facebook. That's all right. You might be wondering, well, what are the perks? Like, are there perks if I donate? Yes, let me show you some of these. So we have found that these perks this year have been really popular, which is super encouraging. So we do have some new perks, because you might be like, well, James, what are the perks anyway? Well, let me show you on screen. Watch the conference live is the first level or perk tier. Just $1. You watch the entire conference live. There will be 4 live stream links that I will email to you if you throw $1 into the crowdfund, and then you'll be able to watch them live. Really cool. You guys, I'm excited because we've already found over 70 people have signed up in Indiegogo as a backer, whether it be at the $1 level or the $50 level or the $25 or the $10, which is super encouraging. Like, this is awesome, you guys. I'm just super encouraged that this one's going really well. They've all gone well, but this one's going, frankly, especially well, where I'm like, hey, I think we're starting to get a hang on this. The reason that I think it's going well is, one, we appreciate you guys being super generous. It means more than you know. And there are some perks that I think people are like, hey, that's a cool perk. Like, I like that. So the next level up is watch all the events live and just throw in a couple of bucks extra, and there's no additional perk. And then there's support without a perk, $5. You can still actually, I'll still actually email you the links if you do that. But if you're like, James, I can't make it that day. I actually worked the whole day, but here's $5. I appreciate it. That really does mean a lot. Embroidered postcard. It's actually, it's embossed. I should have put embossed. I got the words mixed up. So that's basically, it has the Modern Day Debate, you could say, emblem or logo stamped into the postcard, and my personal thank you written by me, saying thank you. We appreciate your support. It means more than you know. So I love writing those out, because it just, to me, when I write it, I'm like, thank you for doing that. This one, I should say the next one. So I'm going to scroll up here. So looking at the other perks, your name in the credits at the end of the debates. So we'll have a list of people's names where we say, hey, huge thank you to these donors who backed this conference to make it possible. That's really cool. Now you're like, well, James, I don't know. I kind of want to, what's this next perk? Signed emblem from all debaters. Well, I'll show you. So if you look on screen right now, this is what that's going to look like. It's just going to be an 8x10. We're going to have the speakers sign it. We'll laminate it. And then we are going to mail it to you as our thanks for donating at that level. In particular, again, that's the $50 level. And that would have names like, instead of, as you can see, it says like Aaron Stawley or something on the top right. I don't know. It will have Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Raw, Mike Jones, David Wood, those signatures of the actual speakers instead. So that's pretty cool, because that perk, a lot of people have been like, hey, that's cool. Like, I like that's a new idea. Or for $60, you can have your question read live during the actual conference. So in other words, you'll be at home. Let's say you put in $60 into the crowdfund. You're like, oh yeah, I'm watching from home. That's cool. And then you shoot me an email and you say, hey, James, I really want to ask Aaron Raw or Tom Jump or whoever it is this question. Cool. I will check my email during the debate, and then I will read it out loud into the microphone on your behalf as a proxy, as if you were basically, I'm speaking in your place, reading that question off. So that's pretty cool. Not only that, the next level up is if you donate at $75, you get a signed photo of your favorite debater. And that's up to you. So, you basically would email me, and I update in the Indiegogo. I basically communicate and I share my email. And you just say, hey, James, like, I really want a signed photo of this speaker. It'd be really cool. And I'm like, cool, that's what you'll get. And what we do is we take the pictures there. We have one of those like instant photo printers. We just bought it for this very purpose. We print out the picture and then we send it to you. And we're like, hey, thanks so much. Like, seriously, it means more than you know. And obviously want to make a quick note. Before we send you the picture at the conference, like I said, we print out the picture there. So it's actually a picture of the debater at that actual conference. And then we bring it to the debater like 2 minutes later and we say, hey, would you be willing to sign this? And the debaters that's cool. So we're all good there. So the next one is one-on-one Zoom chat with James for $100 backing. That one's actually sold out. I want to say thank you guys. I'm amazed by your guys' support. Seriously, it means more than you know. So we're pumped that this crowdfund, like I said, is going really well. So like I said, we've got over 70 backers. And for this point in time, like that's great. So we're really excited, you guys. Want to say thank you guys for your support. It's amazing. And I am just super pumped. Like, seriously, I'm like, wow. Like, this is really cool. Like, it's really coming together. I feel like lately, good to see you, Iron Horse, in the live chat. Durban Poison Wisdom, I see you there. Kevin Howe, good to see you. Thanks for your channel membership. Living Room Speakers, good to see you. Durban, we got one. Projects, good to see you there. I've got to tell you, thank you for your support as channel members, Patreon supporters, you name it. Got to let you know. If you are a Patreon supporter or a channel member, you get to watch the debates live for free because you already support us. So in other words, you don't have to put it in the crowdfund. If you want, like, feel free to put it in the crowdfund, but you're already getting the link to watch live as our thanks. So we are pumped about that. So thank you for your support. And I got to tell you something else. My dear friends, Captain Corn Pop, good to see you there in the live chat. Glad that you made it. I'm just pumped, you guys. I'm super encouraged that, like I said, it feels like the stars are aligning for Modern Day Debate. We hit the 100,000 subscriber mark. You guys, thank you for your support. Like, it really does mean more than you know. So Hannah Anderson says, James, do channel members get the live stream free? Yep, they definitely do. That's also true. So channel members and Patreon supporters already get to watch all the debates live. They don't have to put it into the crowdfund because they've already supported us, and this is our way of saying thank you for already doing that. And yeah, so the other thing I was going to mention, though, is I'm super encouraged. 100,000 subscribers. Thank you guys for your support. This conference is coming together so well where I'm like, wow, like, this is really cool. we're testing out all these. It's almost like business speak. Like we're product testing. We're kind of seeing like what works when setting up these conferences. So that's really cool. I'm just becoming more and more confident with how we run these conferences, where we are getting to the point where we do plan on doing them quarterly, and we may even start doing that this year. So we did not have it. Well, I'd say we had one last fall. So we haven't had one this winter per se, but we are going to have one this April 22nd, and then we're actually going to do a summer one in June. So only 2 months after. It's going to be pretty quick. And then we plan on doing one in the fall. And then in January. So that's pretty cool. I've got to say, you guys, we're excited about that. It really is coming together. Our vision is to provide a neutral platform so that everybody can make their case on a level playing field. That's what we're determined to do. Our 3 values are these. You can guess from what I just said in sharing the vision. Our first value is fairness. We want everybody to get a fair shot. We want things to be neutral here at Modern Day Debate. We don't take any positions. The moderator doesn't jump in every 2 seconds to like say that one side is wrong, which I see on a lot of channels, by the way, which is probably why Modern Day Debate has outgrown them, because it's truly fair. And for real, I have seen that where it's channels that were way bigger than us, that used to be like no joke, like 10 times our size, and we blew past them. And now we're double their size. So I've got to say, thank you guys for your support. I think the reason that is because we actually do give people a fair shot. Thanks for your super chat. Bite me, says James, you are a testament to free speech, sir. You define what it is to be a true American. GZ, does that mean GZ? Does that mean congrats? Is that some sort of hip slang? GZ, I think it means congrats on 100,000, man. Thank you for that. Seriously, it means more than you know. Bite me. We appreciate your support. I am excited. And that's actually what the second value for us is. So I mentioned the first one is we want fairness. The second one, as I had mentioned before at least, we want freedom. Our guests were free from their first breath, and we want to keep it that way. If they want to make the case for a controversial view or a view that people say, oh, that's misinformation, it's so inappropriate to let the flat earthers make their case, we say, hey, you know what? We want to give people a chance to have the freedom to make their case for the flat earth or whatever it might be. Maybe it's controversial. We are going to let them say what they want, because at least it's authentic. And a lot of these channels that are so overly produced, and that's why most people don't like the mainstream media. Gosh, it's so like what they present is so massaged and so watered down into what is appropriate or conventional. But we've got something better for you, something a little bit more authentic, something a little bit more raw and real. But the last value has to do with that, because some people are like, oh, James, if you let people on who have controversial views, I mean, maybe they're dangerous. This is, James, this is dangerous. Misinformation. Anytime you hear someone say, oh, misinformation, I don't know, I get the vibe that it's maybe somebody that wears their bike helmet, even when they're not riding their bike. Just, oh, gosh, they worry about everything. We would say, hey, we agree with you that false or dangerous, potentially harmful ideas are bad. Like, we're actually in the same boat on that one. We just disagree on how to address it. At Modern Day Debate, we believe in the value of competition. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let the chips fall where they may. Let the natural selection of ideas occur, and you're going to find the best ideas win out. That makes sense. Wouldn't it? If you have 2 competent debaters, because we do make sure we have competent debaters who are opposing those dangerous or potentially harmful views, we make sure that there are competent debaters challenging those ideas. And it's a good thing, because why would it be bad for society to see these dangerous ideas get debunked? Huh? That doesn't make any sense. So I asked them, I'm like, what are you afraid that those people with those dangerous ideas are winning? And they're like, oh, no, of course not. But maybe they're more controversial and they win people over that way. That's how they win the debates. I say, well, the research, I'm almost done with my doctorate in psychology. I can tell you what the research says about that. Peripheral routes of persuasion, such as the attractiveness of the speaker, are not as persuasive as logical arguments. So if you think your side has the most logical arguments, then you should think that if there are two competent debaters in the ring, so to speak, the one with the logical arguments is going to win. Like I said, I think for a lot of these people who are like, oh, you can't do that, that's dangerous that you let them make their case. These are the people their arguments are so bad. And by the way, I can even cite research for my position that I just shared. Petty and Cassiapo, the elaboration likelihood model, 1986. I can cite the research. They can't cite any. I always press them and say, what papers are you citing for making your case here? Like, oh, it's just common sense. I'm like, okay, great. My side is just common sense. See how that works? And we can both just say that. The tiebreaker is the empirical data. My side has it. They embarrassingly, especially because a lot of these people, they're like, oh, I'm all about science. I'm all about science. I'm all about science. Science. I effing love science. I effing masturbate to science. All this stuff that they say, and then they don't even have any empirical papers for their position. It's so pathetic. It's just amazing. To me, it amazes me that there are such shallow-minded, intellectually weak-minded, and depraved kind of people out there that their arguments are just so bad. It's just, I'm amazed. It's just they live in their echo chambers where they never get challenged, and so they're like, they get away with it until somebody like me comes around and says, no, it's not really going to work. It's a pretty bad argument. So I want to say, my dear friends, if you believe in those values, namely of fairness, of freedom of speech and competition, then you have come to the right place. Modern Day Debate is for you. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And maybe you have, in which case, hey, hit that like button. Appreciate your support. Want to say I love you guys. Thanks for all of your support. We hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Happy Easter. If you are offended by Happy Easter, Happy Sunday, whatever you want to call it. We hope you all feel welcome, whether you be Christian, atheist, Muslim, politically left, politically right, you name it. CRISPR says you should debate someone on platforming. I'd be open to it if it was a really big fish. Because for me, it's like if I'm going to put my time into it, when I'm trying to build Modern Day Debate, it's got to be somebody like monstrous. So I'd be open to it, but in terms of like who I'd be willing to debate, it's got to be a buzzsaw, like somebody where it's going to get the message out. But I want to say thank you for your support. So I'm open to it. It's just that I want to choose my battles wisely. Riley, yes, thanks for coming by. Says, love you, James. Quite glad to see you. Thanks for your support, Riley. We appreciate that. Thanks for those hitting the love or the heart button in the live chat. I see those hearts flying up into the live chat. Thank you for that support. Iron Horse, thanks for coming by. Says, good luck in court tomorrow. Thank you, Iron Horse. It's going to be tremendous. I always go to court on Easter, Iron Horse. That makes sense. But Iron Horse, you're my boy. All right, I love you. But yes, that's right. For you, though, you'd be like, well, James, tomorrow isn't Easter because I'm in Australia and it's already Easter today. But I want to say thank you guys for watching, whether it be from Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Thanks for your congrats buttons. I see those congrats party things flying into the live chat as well. Thanks for your support, you guys. Seriously, it means more than you know. I love you guys. You guys make this fun. Alex, good to see you here. I see you there in the live chat. Thanks, Living Room Speakers, for your support, as well as Dylan Moats. Thanks for coming by. Lieutenant Gregory Stevens, thanks for being here. And My Sister's Keeper, thanks for coming by. Thank you for your kind words. So a bunch of women want one-on-one Zoom chats with you. LOL, James, stop playing. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. Norman Bates. I think they're all dudes, but I can assure you, it's purely professional. This one from Norman Bates says Las Vegas. Oh, you're in Las Vegas? Is that what you're saying? But yeah, I want to say thanks for your guys' support. I love you guys. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. And like I said, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning of our story. We have big things in store for the future at Modern Day Debate. We are continually refining, trying to improve ourselves, trying to improve our methods. So thank you for your support. Thanks for your super chat. Caught in the middle. Appreciate your support. It means more than you know. Want to say we're excited about the future. We have big things coming by. It's going to be huge. Thanks everybody for your support. I love you guys, and I'll see you at the next debate.